All right, this is part 4 of the series on taking our work from the lab to real life. And in this part, we're going to dive in a little bit more on the idea of what happens if we try to take literally the lab to real life. We've talked about the 3 branches, but just to reiterate, for experimental analysis, the focus is on controlling variables. So really being able to clearly show this is the reason why this happened and have that prediction and control. That's the whole point of experimental analysis. You isolate variables, you reduce noise, so you can say with confidence, this is what happened. This is what I can predict, I can control, etc. And that is appropriate for experimental work. However, when we're looking at our actual applied practice, is it appropriate? No. Applied work has a different job. In applied work, the environment is not something you strip and make void of things to control every single variable. You are working in real life settings, affecting people's real lives. You're working in schools, in homes, in communities. All of these have tons of variables and can get quite messy. People have relationships, stress, learning histories, regulation needs, all things that do not stop just because we're having a session. These are all things that need to be considered. When applied work is designed to look like a lab, when practitioners are trained by researchers who value laboratory work and don't know the realities of practice, of being in people's real lives outside of a study, what ends up happening is the priority becomes control instead of the human in front of you. And here's a key distinction. If a skill is only performed when conditions are tightly controlled, then we're not teaching meaningful skills. Applied work means we're looking at the current actual environment of the person and how to structure that environment to be a supportive, safe learning environment. And by that alone, whatever skills are being taught would be present no matter what happens. We shouldn't even have to plan for generalization if our interventions are meaningful enough, if they're connected well enough to the people that we're providing intervention to. Applied rigor is not about control. Our measure of whether or not we're effective, whether or not we're impactful, is the person in front of us. Are we honoring and affirming that person? Are we creating environments that feel safe for that person and choosing with the person skills to work on that are meaningful and valuable to them, not just arbitrarily chosen because they're on a list that some dude put together 20 years ago. This is why social validity matters. This is why context matters. And this is why we cannot measure the applied work that we do in the same way that we measure experimental work. When we mix these values up, we don't get better science. We don't get better practice. We get interventions that might make sense on paper, but are lacking when it comes to actually understanding the person. And of course, then lacking when it comes to effectiveness, lacking when it comes to being humane, lacking when it comes to being affirming. I could keep going, but you get the point. And having this over focus on trying to replicate the lab in the applied setting and prioritizing the same values that researchers would have instead of having our own values as practitioners, that's not a failure of applied behavior analysis. Partially, I think it's a growing pain, like this distinction of people who came into the field as researchers, as people really trying to understand behavior and not really having that transition to the practitioner realm. And then we have all of these practitioners being taught by people with different values. And it's not to say one value is better or worse than the other. It's just that we have to recognize what should we be valuing as practitioners is vastly different than what people value as researchers. The one main overlap, obviously, is data-driven decision-making, but even that is going to look different. Our data as practitioners working in an applied setting is not going to be as clean and controlled as you would see in a lab, nor should it be, because the more clean and controlled you make that data, the less you are engaging with the person in front of you in a naturalistic way and supporting them. There's a trade-off. And we have to make sure we're prioritizing the human in front of us and not just looking at the values that a researcher would have. Applied behavior analysis can do all these things, and it has throughout the years. But drifting happens, other influences come in from various sources for various reasons, and we have to make sure that we're really digging in and reflecting on why we're here doing what we're doing and who we're benefiting and what we value. But in video 5, I will dive in deeper on this. What are we optimizing for and what our focus should be? I mean, I feel like I've touched on it, but just to dive in a little deeper, I, again, will continue to address any questions or comments that people have as I'm able to, and thanks for sticking around.